Without further ado, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much.
Yours.
Andre. It's a privilege to be here, and I want to thank all of you for coming out on a Friday afternoon. Let's see, thanks to David and the others that I've already had an opportunity to speak with. It's great. Now, how transportation is one of those interdisciplinary topics that we're all attracted to for some reason or another. And the disciplinary training that we all receive is in some way, shape, or form shapes how we think of problems. So I'd like to ask each person to identify themselves with one of 5 different groups here. The first group is engineers. The second group are public policy type people-ish. The third group are maybe design, and a fourth is going to be planning. Design, architects, however you want to define design. Okay, not so much. Planners, and then advocates. Okay, all right. So transport is, as I've had the opportunity for almost 25 years now to exchange topics and advice and suggestions with David Levinson. And almost 10 years ago, when we finished this book, one of the considerations that we kind of put forth was that in 2015, transport was getting interesting again, right? Revolutionary forces were taking root with respect to how people could access goods and services in new, different ways, in ways that were more mainstream than previously available in the prior 10 years or so. Now, this seems to still be the case, but I've almost gained more interest in that, but also even more interest in why things haven't really changed in the 10 years since we kind of suggested that this was the case. So what is it that's holding us back with respect to realizing how this provides a new alternative for providing accessibility to people? So now the idea of considering how things aren't changing in how we approach these issues is a topic of kind of intellectual curiosity to me, how things are not changing. And why we continue, at least from some perspectives of public policy, how we continue to, as a society, throw good money after bad money in this respect. And the reason for this outlook has largely to do with 3 years ago now, when I was sent off to Washington, D.C. to observe the world through a completely different political lens, or a completely different lens, one of steeped in high in politics, working at the U.S. Department of State, and trying to understand why the United States was throwing really good money to low and moderate income countries, for example, to build more roads, after we know that roads are one of the leading causes of, you name it, XYZ PDQ with respect to either climate, equity, et cetera, et cetera. Not necessarily building more roads, but building more roads that clearly favor automobile-oriented infrastructure. Okay, so we can look at this through a cultural perspective. We can look at it through a scientific. I'm trying to understand all of it and trying to basically bring ourselves down to, if we want to, as a society, pivot to something that is more resembling net zero, how can we do that with the least amount of moving parts? And I like to think about places. I also like to think about networks and how networks have grown. And we can take a look at the Roman road network and see the theories that have guided this particular path of evolution. I would bring this graphic forth in several times in Washington, D.C., trying to communicate to, say, for example, the elected officials where and how and why they were going to invest in this particular port or that particular rail line or this particular. And most of the time, they kind of looked at me with two heads. They didn't understand what I was talking about with respect to network growth. And that's fine. I don't really expect them to. But I think it's a really important element as we consider how quickly we want to, we as a society, the Royal Society here, how quickly we want to pivot to something that does really mean net zero, or something that we really do mean sustainable development. And what does that mean culturally, disciplinarily, politically, and how far off the mark are we right now with respect to doing that? In the United States, we're pretty well off the mark, but we continue to say these things, and we continue, I think, to mean them, but we don't really know what we're meaning. So my point here is that when we think about urban systems and how people want to get the goods and services that they want to on a daily basis, it's important for us to now, given the sense of urgency, if you have watched, you guys know Bill Nye the Science Guy? Some of you know Bill Nye the Science Guy. You do? Safety glasses on, right? And then you've seen the one where he's actually extinguishing the globe because the world's on fire, right? Okay, so if we accept that as a premise, which is neither here nor there, what are the actions that we could do more quickly? How can we get there more quickly? And what are the levers that we have? And so to understand this, we need to kind of think through how different urban systems relate to each other, but they also relate to different timescales. So if you think about how long it takes to construct residential buildings or industrial buildings or establish the rights of way, you know, these have a high, especially the rights of way, they have a high durability once they're built, right? Or once they're constructed, once they're appropriated. Now, some of this durability we're recognizing we have too much concrete in our world. We have too much, you name it, environmental destruction product in our world. How do we reverse these trends? And which ones have a higher probability for being reversed? And how quickly will that come? At what at what political cost? The point I'm suggesting here is one that I think many of us have thought through, but I just want to underscore for emphasis, which is we have a really rich resource that we can lean into. It's called the public right-of-way when we want to solve any of the polycritical issues that are coming down the pipe, be it homelessness, be it street safety, be it access to goods and services. The street space is a really valuable space in cities, and we've thrown it away for a very long period of time. And this space can change. Not only can it change, but it can change very quickly, and it can change cheaply, okay? So if we approach how we want that space to possibly change, if we want that space to change, we're trying to allow others to see through different and new ways of seeing the world, okay? And I want to thank Susan Handy to a large extent by influencing some of these boxes here, which then influences the decisions and actions, which then influences the practices and the manuals, which then will ultimately lead to a higher grade infrastructure than we have right now. So if this path can be kind of internalized more so by more people, I think we're going to be in a better space, which is a different way of kind of saying most communities right now, I would claim, are disproportionately weighted to favor accessibility by a conventional car. And what we're trying to do as a society is still provide that same level of accessibility, but not necessarily favor the conventional car as much, and try to backfill with other ways of thinking through how people are going to get to that space. So we're trying to bring that into balance with one another, recognizing that GDP has long been disassociated now, many years, I would claim, from automobile-related infrastructure. I mean, that tie has kind of been severed. We can still make a lot of money. We can still get happiness by not continuing the same practices that we've done in the past. But yet we still get hung up on every time that we try to do this, it gets mired in politics, it gets mired in regulation, it gets mired in wherever it gets mired into. And so recently I've been trying to do a better job of relating some of the research that all of us do collectively to publicly facing, to externally facing audiences that hopefully can start to grasp, I think, some of the issues that many of us wrestle with on a daily basis. Because if there's anything that I learned in Washington, D.C., it's that we're not good systems thinkers. We're not good about putting, knowing what to do about how to solve this issue. And for example, we hear sometimes we know what to do, we just don't know how to do it. I think David's mentioned that several times. I guess I question to a certain extent if we know what we need to do. Do we have agreement on what we need to do and how we're going to do that? And so the reason for me bringing this up is that this is a highly contentious space that I've gotten recently involved with, talking about street safety and paths forward. These are just some headlines chaotically shown with respect to some articles over the past 4 months, 6 months, if you will, maybe a little bit longer than that. And what I'm here to do is kind of share some of those insights with you vis-a-vis thinking about accessibility-based planning really quick. Now, all this is stimulated by thinking about how streets can change. This is a picture from downtown or the city center of Bologna. They can dig up and they dig up further, and sure enough, there are the Roman chariot scars. Celebrations if you want. And, they repave, and every so often they give certain amounts of priority to buses, depending on the political winds. They give certain priorities to hardscaping pedestrian travel. I mean, it's a very fluid space. Every time I go back, every 2 or 3 years, it seems like they designed something a little bit differently. You do this in the Netherlands, for example. You can go to a Netherlands on a Thursday, and you can come back on a Sunday, and you'll see that it's a completely different intersection. They know how to do these infrastructure improvements almost overnight. A lot of cultures can't. But when we think through metropolitan areas and what we're looking for, time and time again, I think one of the main issues that I like to bring forth is that a half of all the travel that usually happens in a suburban or whatever urban area is less than 6 kilometers. This is a rich space to innovate in. Less than 6 kilometers, 4 miles-ish. This is just bicycle trips, but bicycle trips, car trips, all trips, we're looking at a majority of the travel is less than 6 kilometers. A majority of the trips, not necessarily the miles trips, which is kind of maybe a reflection. Now, so where are some of the global thinking on this headed? Who's been doing what? How have other societies gotten through this? Glenn Lyons at the University of, I don't know if he's still at Bristol or what, University of West England, I believe. So he's coming up with the triple access playbook in which, he's basically saying we need to abandon the predict and provide model, and we need to gravitate toward the design, decide, and provide model, which is great in theory, and he has a whole card deck. I don't know if you've come across this, but it's actually, he goes on tour playing cards with people about trying to reinforce some of these ideas. It's kind of cute to see him play cards with a 52 set deck. Do you prize this? Do you prize that? Do you want this? Do you want that? All in efforts to kind of reinforce a decide and provide type model. That's good. Except when you live in America and you can't get anyone to agree on anything. So how do we get through allowing people to see that they want to decide on doing something that they have been given access to for all of their lives, and they see anything to diminish that as a threat to their kind of overall livelihood? That's a challenging space that I am increasingly trying to communicate. But if we consider where we are in 2024 right now, there seems to be enough writing on the wall that in 2035 we're going to want more activities close to where we live. That's a big assertion. I know that. What do we mean by activities? I mean, the nature trails. I mean, the hospitals. I mean, it's more disfragmented. And if you read the national, all the reports coming from the National Renewable Energy Lab in the United States, for example, I mean, and I think some of your energy work here, we're talking about smaller grids, smaller units of production, and being more kind of self-sustaining while still having some access to the larger veins. the reason I bring this up is because what does it mean for localized travel? And how do we build that network? How do we build that network as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, as efficiently as possible? And how can we allow that space to blossom? Who are we designing it for? So what I'll just say that having come back to my city council now, I have the ear of 3 of our city council people. And I try to explain these concepts to them. And they say to me, well, what do you want me to do? How do I know that you have the right answer? And I don't have a good answer. I mean, how do you know that providing more space to this is going to lead to that? And well, this study worked here, and this study worked here, and this study worked here. Yeah, but they're not dealing with this study here. They're this context here. And you kind of get in that kind of mindset. And then I say, well, right now I think you're using transit as a lifeline. You're suggesting that you don't want to pursue this course of action because you are thinking that providing a transit remedy is going to be a better solution for you. But people in the US don't ride transit. So we continue to kind of put these ideas out there without a kind of strong reinforcement that they're going to work, because it's easier to do that than it is to not give something, than to diminish something that people already have, such as free flow travel. So finding, we were just talking about this with Stephen and Jen, finding that Pareto efficient solution here, which is really what politicians want, is really challenging. And this is where I would claim that accessibility research could provide more analysis to help with this. Now, what do I mean by that? If we do accessibility research, we know that certain places have certain values come with certain access to that particular place. Which modes should be balanced using what formula, as opposed to an ideological discussion. I would claim an ideological discussion is one which suggests we need more transit, we need more bicycling, we need more walking. And then the bicycling people fight for resources with the transit people, and the transit people fight for resources with the walking people, and next thing you know, nothing really kind of happens. Now, if a politician has stronger evidence to suggest that if we do this, we're going to result in that, and I'd like to open the discussion to what that type of research looks like and how the trade-offs would be realized. I think that that's a really rich area for where more analysis can help. Where more analysis really isn't needed is to tell us how bad the situation is. And academics love to do more analysis to further diagnose the problem, right? So we know how the problem is getting worse, particularly with respect to safety. We know how people's ideas are kind of further reinforced, but we throw these ideas out here, or they're sometimes irrespective of the political context. Why? It's easier. And we're paid to do research. So that's good. But we're seeing these issues play out on a much more daily basis. I can show you, I can reveal some of the discussions that I've started to systematically analyze with respect to a 4-3 conversion that we've had in town, in our town, in Boulder. This was option A for basically a less than a kilometer stretch of road. Lasted the political process is now in its 8th year. We've done extensive studies, and it's just politics coming down to, do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want this? Or do you want that? Right? And so we continue to spiral out of control, talking about this versus this versus this versus this. Fortunately, they are going to go for this. But this almost won, to the tune of having to widen buy additional right-of-way to widen the street here. Now, this is not unique. I mean, Fiona Campbell gave a wonderful description of what's happening in the politics of Sydney, sorry, yesterday to me. And I mean, the politics are just as volatile, right? So my question for you as researchers, economics or engineering researchers, are what type of research is necessary to kind of get us through this logjam, if you will? Where can we provide more evidence to convince politicians to think through a different lens, perhaps, a lens that is formerly, away from this kind of advocacy, kind of continue to beat the drum cycle, and what is a where are the trade-offs? So I fully realize that what I'm suggesting is easier said than done. But my point here is that we have certain ideas and innovations that we as transportation researchers bring to the table. That's what we have we have a perspective about thinking through these things in ways that the populace just doesn't have. Obviously, any idea that our research comes up with and prescribes is going to have to go through some sort of net here. It's going to have to satisfy, is it hip on technology? Is it hip on is being met with a market? Who's going to accept this? How does it resonate with the culture? And ultimately, how does it resonate with the politics? Only will we be successful if we kind of find some sort of path that satisfies all of this, all of these nets. Now, I'm going to spend the last 3 minutes suggesting one rationale for additional research that could be carried out here. If we accept the fact that we would benefit from higher value of accessibility-based research trying to come up with solutions, how can people have the same type of accessibility through any other means other than large cars, which is the thing that is really kind of the problematic element of society right now? Any other means. So if me as a politician, I know that I'm not supposed to prioritize cars or big cars, or maybe, so the first thing is, what is it about big cars that people are willing to kind of give up on? Is it their speed? Is it their access to the location? Is it preferential parking? Is it, I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's an interesting question. The second thing is, should we be prioritizing urban forms or solutions at a pedestrian scale or a bike scale, or maybe a somewhat different scale, which is thinking here, something along the sides, the size of this. So I have been playing with this idea for, I don't know, 2 decades now in different contexts. And is it appropriate for Sydney? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Is it appropriate for more suburban environments? Maybe. In other words, introducing a new class of vehicle to the street space. And if you introduce a new class of vehicle, that gives you certain leeways that you wouldn't have otherwise with respect to solving problems. So again, this is a far-reaching concept out there. It provides the freedom, it provides the flexibility, it diminishes the environmental costs of the travel. It isn't necessarily attached to a fixed route transit way, which typically is an excuse, I think, to take action sooner than later. These ideas are not necessarily well accepted by a lot of people because it's, we're in an arms race right now with respect to our vehicle size. And it takes a lot to think through how and if and why a new type of vehicle could be incentivized. But ultimately, I would suggest that this is a future space that has a lot of potential in trying to understand how we can make the biggest impact with the fewest number of moving parts. with that, I'd love to open it up to questions about some of these issues and see how maybe the refinements in terms of the research questions could be kind of dialed in. Thank you so much.
Questions from the audience?
Does changing the size of a car changes lethality?
Changes legality,
No, it's lethality.
changes lethality.
Yeah. If it hits you, it kills you. At what point is it sort of small enough?
Have you seen the new ones with the roll cages?
No, I've seen Bambinos and Suzukis and little things, but they'll still kill you.
Forget the name of the manufacturer. They're in California. You know which ones I'm talking about? They are the ones that basically you have a protected armor around you, and you have a kind of a seat in the back. And
Lethality comes with who you hit.
oh, you're talking about me hitting somebody else as opposed to being hit? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So I would be under. I would be more risk. I would be under the higher likelihood that I would kill somebody if I were driving one of these things.
Well, no, I'm a pedestrian. So my question is sort of will reducing the size of the car make the road space and the footpaths a little safer for me?
If the car is going slower, maybe.
Well, even if the car is going the same speed,
The physics.
the mass
Is lower.
Yeah.
so the impact is lower. The height is lower, so the impact is on your legs instead of your upper torso. And so, yes, Alex, you will be more likely to survive.
Right.
When Kevin hits you with one of these cars.
So it's better that people drive Bambinos then.
In a world, in a world where everyone drove Bambinos at the same speeds that everyone's driving cars today,
Yeah.
I'm sure there'd be fewer pedestrian fatalities.
Yes. At the moment, we're stuck with people sort of in an arms race with SUVs.
And it's hard to break out of that cycle unless you continue to throw more money at it through more protective devices and stuff like that.
Who needs an SUV?
Well, apparently, the majority of people that buy cars.
I was wondering, in a lot of South Asia context, the traffic problems are really mad. But one of the local solutions that has emerged and has continued resiliently over the years is, tuk-tuks and auto rickshaws and cycle rickshaws. So when we had no public transportation options and no private transportation options, and you didn't have the money to say hire a taxi, what you would do is pay 7 rupees or 10 rupees and do a kilometer in a shared little tuk-tuk. It's called auto rickshaws. And over the years, I think they've transformed into running on cleaner energy and not using petrol. And these are like little vehicles which allow like 5 people to sit, which are often overloaded beyond the safety limit in like India. But still, what I mean is the idea of it. Because the images that you showed reminded me of those sorts of vehicles, and which are not even being privately driven. Like they have one driver and, they're just people hopping on and hopping off the local range. Paying a small fare, which is also very affordable. So do you think systems like that would be likely as a possibility, or shared systems or pooled systems?
What do you think?
I don't know. I'm just remembering my childhood, and that's what flashed through. That's why I shared it.
You see these footages of intersections in Vietnam, for example, and how crazy those are to the average, eye. I like to find the accessibility / safety / clean energy optimum solution here of that type of environment in a Australian-based or North American-based context. So I mean, I have, visions of sugar plums in my head about what they did in Sweden, for example, in 1967, I believe. They switched all the driving from the left hand to the right hand, or vice versa. And they did it on a particular day, September, whatever, I think it was 67. And it was chaos for the first month or two, right? Until people got a hang of it. And if that is a type of intervention that could be done with smaller cars, and a politician wanted to get on board with this, I think you're headed in a better direction doing what you're suggesting than what we're doing right now, which is trying to fix the system. Like a clean cut. So, I mean, what I have we talked about it earlier on Tuesday, but also over lunch with this emergency streets concept, where when there's a fatality on the road, let's change the system and let's prioritize something else. And I would claim that that's a good thing to prioritize, what you're suggesting. And we could actually install a system where, say, 2 years from now, we say we're going to change the streets, and we get a plan together, and we're going to change the streets in 2 years to favor this. But I realize that this is totally maybe politically out there. But you put a plan together for municipality XYZ, and they sign on to doing this. And then in the meantime, you tell the people that live in the town, you have 2 years to ramp up to change your vehicle stock. And we're going to provide you some sort of incentive to change your vehicle stock based on a smaller vehicle. This would be more particularly palatable, I would claim, to classic suburban residences that have 2 cars that want to give up one of their big cars. So, thinking through the market. I don't know, there was another question.
There's a comment on that. Golf carts in retirement communities are sort of a perfect example of this, where people who would otherwise you'd expect to be driving around in SUVs will be perfectly happy driving around their golf cart in their neighborhood and on public roads at a maximum speed of 30 or 40 miles per hour in the US, so 60 kilometers an hour here. And it's fine, and there's a perfect acceptance of something like this in a confined area.
Yeah.
So it might be another model to get from here to there.
I think, yeah. What,
Oh, I've been asking questions all day.
Like how do you get to the idea of like a smaller car will be the solution? Because I think smaller cars have been here as an idea, or like have been like from a lot of years. I think Stephen actually did a presentation of smaller cars in a museum a couple of years ago. I'm wrong, Stephen?
Yeah, the micro cars.
Yeah, micro cars.
Yeah.
Because I have like kind of my thing is that I think the reason why people want a bigger car is a matter of convenience. Like take my example, like I'm married, I have a daughter and I have a dog. How do I put both in a small car?
Take them on the train. Sorry.
No. So
That's a whole nother story.
The idea of the micro cars have been there for a while and it just doesn't resonate. But there are other ideas that I think, why don't we take better, the good examples where transportation is actually working better, like, maybe Japan, maybe Singapore, some Scandinavian countries, and then see the solutions they are doing. And then see like, this might be more feasible, that is, a bit of utopic solution. We changed the view of everybody that we started, and I agree with you, like it's very difficult to change because I don't think we're gonna make it. But I don't get to see how the small car idea will resonate instead of other things that are proven.
maybe I didn't get through. I guess what would be an alternative?
Oh, well, reducing the speed, I think, will be
what?
providing a connected network of cycle lanes and pedestrian, I think that would be another way. Yeah, priority for transit instead of cars. I know that's complicated in the US, but those are solutions that have been implemented in other countries and they actually work.
Yeah, I mean, my own thinking on this is obviously guided, if not paralyzed, by an American context. And seeing through what the resistance is. Now, Sydney is not an American context, one-to-one, but it's not that far from it. You have the same tensions. I just don't see the political, I don't see it happening to solve the crises that we're under.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think it's more difficult for politicians and for the culture of a country like Australia to accept that these smaller cars are going to be a solution.
Yeah.
The solution, because it's a huge country, people like to have.
I mean, my quick response, and then I want to hear other questions, is it is a difficult argument to make, if not only for let's use something that's been tested better in other countries and bring that here, wherever here is. But the here in America is enough different than the here anywhere else. So I'm kind of willing to not accept those arguments. But what I will say is that I guess I lost me. What we're doing right now is we're allowing those bigger cars to have access to these spaces that they really have no business being in because of our historic regulations. And so the microcar movement has never really been given a fair shake. It comes up in the literature every 6 years, and it's always talked about. I mean, if Stephen did a study, and before that, you know, this person did a study, and this person did a study, and I mean, it always comes up, and then it kind of dies down. It never always comes up, and it dies down. It's never been given a fair shake with respect to the network provision aspect of where it's supposed to ride or be used, because that network has always been disproportionately given over to larger cars. And we're just kind of seeing that right now with respect to how unsafe the larger cars are. So I kind of don't necessarily buy the argument that it has been tried and it's failed. So, yeah.
I was thinking about the success with pop-up infrastructure. In post-COVID, you know, there was pop-up bike lanes put around Sydney, and a certain number of them have now become permanent. Because you were talking about the political palatability of certain things, and also certain infrastructure changes being rather easy to implement and rather having long lead time, and also, or some have a long persistence time once they're in place. Is there much research out there about pop-up changes, temporary changes? And because if you tell people, oh, it's only, we're going to try it out for a year and see how it goes, they might be more accepting of the change if they know that you know, it may revert back to the good old days later on. Just yeah, and you seem to be fishing for new research programs and new research things to find out more about. I was wondering if there's good research on the political implications of pop-up infrastructure.
I think based on what I know about the American context, and again, I haven't recently spoken with my colleagues at NACDO or the North American City and Transportation official people, but there's lots of innovation, and they're all being called pilots, and there's lots of cities that are doing stuff. I think they don't quite have the impact that they're done on they're done on places that don't matter. So that they can kind of, they're not the high critical places, right? But I mean, Austin, Texas is doing a lot of pop-up stuff. Memphis, Tennessee is doing a lot of pop-up stuff. You can read about it on Streets blog and whatnot. I don't know what they're optimizing for, though. And I would claim that if we do pop-ups optimizing for human scaled accessibility, that would be a great idea. Not so much just pop up for the sake of pop up, but pop up for the sake of how does the human scaled accessibility get prioritized and impacted because of the pop up. And if I can have that as a research question, I would. I don't know anyone that's doing that. The value of pop ups. I think people are doing the value of street modifications over the long term, hypothetically.
Yeah, I'm not interested in pop-up for the sake of it. It's pop-up as a way to progress to a permanent, structure.
Well, that is exactly what is some of the guiding thoughts for this concept that I described, emergency streets, where if there's a fatality, you actually do a pop-up
Yeah.
overnight to try something new and show to the community that the sky's not going to fall. And giving the municipality, or allowing or empowering the municipality with the legality to do that through declaration of a public health crisis.
So, again, thinking about like, how do you get incremental change? We have some bike lanes, but not enough, and they're not real popular. And we don't have very many micro cars. But is there any way to, in a sense, say, well, if we couple the micro car on top of the bike and allowed them to use bike lanes, and then we made more road bike only or micro mobility only or micro car only, that there might be sort of a marriage of convenience that would get you faster towards what you want and induce people to buy these cars because it gives them more access in a more acceptable way?
What did you call that? A marriage of convenience?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I would agree, yes. I mean, my first question for Fiona Campbell yesterday was, how are you feeling about people violating the rule and using non-bikes in this space? And it was anticipated, we don't want it, right? But I would claim that this provides additional amplification for the bike movement, as long as vehicles are going slow enough in the way that they do in kind of, I mean, everyone talks about the Netherlands as kind of the kumbaya of sustainable transportation. I mean, if you've been there, it's pretty chaotic. And it's chaotic because everybody's just kind of getting along and there's kind of eye contact and stuff like that. But it's hard for people to kind of see through that semi-controlled chaos, which I think is kind of a benefit.
I just have some comments.
Yeah.
Actually, I agree that the one that you're proposing, the microcar, is a sustainable one. We have a sort of like that in the Philippines. It's called e-bikes or e-tricycles, or electric tricycles. It's like an e-bike but with three wheels. Yeah. So it became popular in the Philippines because not so many people have cars, and many people, and our public transport is not so good. That's why they look for other ways so that they can go from one place to another. So when it became popular, the problem that arose there was they even drive those e-tricycles on highways, which pissed off the car drivers because they are too slow.
Mhm.
They have a maximum speed of 25 kilometers per hour. Yeah. And I think a possible problem that if there is an electric tricycle on the road along with the other cars is that the regular car might crash with that e-tricycle or with that microcar, which may also lead to more deaths or more accidents. So maybe maybe we can also propose soon an enhancement of the roads where they will have their own lanes, or maybe they can share lanes with the bicycles because they have the same speed. there so that the regular cars and the e-tricycles will
Mhm.
not crash on the same road.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, has anyone been to Oslo recently? My understanding is that they're kind of doing some of this. They got their swim lanes.
It's still a difficult place to walk around. I found.
Yeah.
It's not dense enough.
Yeah.
It's a bit spread out. So you have to walk.
I think these are the friction points for trying to find a solution space is, how much separation. I mean, the Pro manual from the Netherlands gives us good guidance about when we need to separate and when we don't need to separate based on traditional sizes of vehicles and speed. What we're trying to do is innovate new vehicles and new speeds based on a certain level of political tolerance that doesn't seem to be there. Or lack of imagination.
Or maybe we can get the root cause on why cars are crashing with each other. Is it because of high speeds? If it is because of high speeds, why do they have that high speed? Is it because the lanes are so wide or what? So if the lanes are so wide, why then not put traffic calming measures? Yeah.
I think we're getting at the root of the transportation planning profession. With what they have historically optimized. And what we're trying to suggest is an alternative optimization. Now, what is that alternative optimization? You can optimize on 1, 2, 3, 6 characteristics. Resources is one, livability is a second, and I don't know, you name something else. There you have an accessibility based on an optimization of 3 different livability, resources, and let's say speed of travel. And if you can optimize accessibility with those 3 things, understanding that path forward, I think is a rich research area. Yeah.
Another thing, I think, imagine that as the urban planner, if we make 1 kilometer highway streets for big car, we can make 1 kilometer for pedestrian and cyclists parallel to focusing on big cars and high-speed vehicles. I think that at this point, we don't focus more on low-speed modes, pedestrian, cycling, or small vehicle with low speed. It could be another point of view of looking sides of urban planners, practitioners, and politicians at this point. Because I remember last year in an active mode session in Trans-Travel, a gentleman from Netherlands said that don't you think that Netherlands cities that we see right now is almost be like this. Urban planners there focus on making cycle paths and cycle infrastructure parallel to big cars and for vehicles. That's why we can see that Netherlands cities is more friendly environment for.
I mean, how would we were talking about right before, how would Sydney respond if Cybertrucks, the new Tesla Cybertrucks, were welcomed on this they're banned right now from the continent?
Hope so, but I don't.
I mean, my town is being taken over by them. There are lots of Cybertrucks, and there's lots of them coming downtown. And they're coming, and literally they're coming into my neighborhood. Right? And so at what point do we just say enough is enough? That's kind of some of my thinking.
If you're saying that future city would be so much accessible to kids, we can say that focusing on such friendly infrastructure option. Using cyclists and low speed vehicles in a neighborhood, so much accessible neighborhood.
Well, I think we're saying the same thing. I'm just trying to pave that
Yeah,
path to
yeah,
get there quicker. And we can perhaps disagree on ideology about the magnitude of the larger trucks.
We have time for one last.
Yep. Jennifer.
I mean, I think I've always thought that the car for access is like a sledgehammer for a thumbtack. And in a way, the smaller vehicles is kind of reducing the size of that discrepancy. But the issue of the cyber trucks, it's being pushed by the automotive industry, right? So they're providing this new product. And I remember on Tuesday, you sort of said, there's no point going there. But do you think that we do have to enter that space? Or maybe you didn't say it like that. You sort of said that's a really hard rock to move. Do you think we need to enter that space a bit more bravely, like starting to challenge some of that rhetoric and the marketing that pushes these vehicles onto people?
Yeah, I don't know about challenging that rhetoric. I think it's a great question, Jen. I'm kind of reminded of either Groucho Marx or the Woody Allen. You know, if you can't teach, you do, and if you can't do, you teach, and if you can't teach or do, you teach Jim. Well, if you, what I'm about to say is not necessarily a complete metaphor of that, but you know, if they say if you can't beat them, join them, and it's going to be difficult to join the auto industry. You know, you can't beat the auto industry, but in which case you have to, you don't want to join the auto industry, but I do think that we can lead the auto industry. And the lead here is helping to better document time and time again. And, you know, some of the PhD researchers probably in the room know more about this than I do, about the value of human scale related accessibility and how that's persisted over time. Places that generally are scaled around humans, places that have a human scale prioritization have higher value that people want to be around. Generally, well, I think more than generally speaking. Now, there's always going to be nuances here, but if the automobile industry can kind of get that, hear that message from the research community, I'd like to think that they might be able to kind of change their MO. Maybe, but
What did they do in the cigarette?
what did they do and where?
Cigarettes.
Yeah, right. It's the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of parallels that are being drawn between the condition that we're in right now with motor normativity and automobility and stuff and cigarettes. So, you know, it's astonishing to me, and I'll just reflect on this comment and then we can wrap things up. Before this opportunity, I was in Ghent, the Brussels, the capital of the EU, which is really trying to wrestle with this issue as well. Everybody's trying to wrestle with this issue, but it was a conference on EU, energy, EU, US, energy, transportation, electrification, energy, blah, 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 blah. Okay, it was largely sponsored by ITS Davis and the EU. Okay, so Dan Sperling, if you know that name, he brought in all his people, including 2 commissioners from the California Air Resources Board, California Air Resources Board. And his question to them on the final panel, and there were 5 people up here, 2 of them were these people. And basically they, the question was, what are we going to do about carb load? Dan Sperling kind of offered that as a softball question. And the California Air Resources Board people said, neither of them are willing to shame carb load yet. They didn't say yet. They said they're not willing to shame carb load.
Now,
Why? And
I just, I,
what more
do you need?
what more evidence do you need about this? And
I didn't ask them that.
then I went back and
And I asked 2 or 3 of my colleagues, and apparently Governor Newsom
is
instructing them to take it easy on the automobile industry.
don't
Be so critical.
on the automobile industry.
So, you know, Governor Newsom is kind of,
Here, as much
as anyone else, to blame
for
some of the situation is,
but
it just further reinforces kind of the direness.
I think that we're in. So with that optimistic thought, no, really, the accessibility research that is fun to read coming out of this group is illuminating. I find it always challenging to get my hand around methodologically. I enjoy reading your papers or the snippets of it, and so look forward to future interactions. Thanks.
Thank you very much.